Well, good morning and welcome to the Daily Dose. Thank you for joining with me this morning. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Terry Rials, Director of Missions out of Weatherford, Oklahoma, pastored for a number of years and now has taken on this new role, along with his passion for church revitalization. What is that? We're going to dive into that. Why do we need it? Well, let me tell you why we need to talk about church revitalization. Some of the latest statistics that have come out suggest to us that 90% of churches have plateaued, declined, or died. And that is a staggering statistic to consider. How do we address this issue? How do we move past that issue? How do we, in our own place and time, look at ourselves and ask, how can we not be that statistic? That's coming up on the Daily Dose this morning. As always, we are supported and guided by First Baptist Church of Crowley, Texas, and we are thankful for that. If you'd like to support this and other ministries from First Baptist Crowley, I invite you to go to fbccrowley.org, and you can click on the Give button and give your tithe or offering to support the ministries, ongoing ministries of First Baptist Church, as well as be able to reserve your seat for worship this coming Sunday. And if you'd like to volunteer any of our tech needs, our cleaning needs that we have on a weekly basis, we'd love to know about your interest and passion to be involved in that. But right now, here's my conversation with Dr. Terry Rials. Well, Terry, thank you for being with me today. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about you, your ministry, where you are, what you're doing now. I know I kind of said a little bit, but fill us in a little bit.
You did. I just completed a pastorate of 28 and a half years in Oklahoma City, and God just began to work in my life and open some doors, and I didn't see it coming that God would lead me to work in an association of churches, and it kind of fits me very well, actually, because the two passions that I have for ministry are in the area of missions and in church revitalization. And I still get to preach and I still get to lead, but I get to lead in missions and lead out in revitalization in an association that has that as a great need. Several years ago, after completing my doctorate in church revitalization, I began a ministry called Church Revitalizer. Mm-hmm. You can find information about that at churchrevitalizer.com, but it's a resource ministry because like so many, like some of the churches that you just described, my church was stuck and not really growing. We were doing good things, but not really doing everything we needed to do to move out of that stagnant position. I went on that quest to try to figure out, what I had to do to lead my church.
Right.
And, it just kind of morphed into a ministry that, hey, when I found answers and found resources, I wanted to make those available for other people. So it's a resource ministry to churches.
Absolutely. Now, what church were you at in Oklahoma City? Remind me.
I was at Crestview Baptist Church.
That's right. And you were there 28 years?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize you had been there that long. That's awesome.
A long time. I have the 10-year record for that church. Probably always will. So.
Hey, 28 years is probably a 10-year record for the vast majority of churches anywhere.
Yeah. It's kind of unusual, that's for sure.
Who's
means
there
I'm doing
now?
something right or wrong. I don't know which one.
Who's there now?
I don't think they have a pastor yet.
Oh, wow. They can't replace you. Man, it's just too hard.
Not supposed to. They're probably swinging from the chandeliers,
Right. So what'd you tell me, 7 months in now as DOM?
Yes.
All right. So you're still fresh meat for all the churches.
Yeah. And it's been really weird. Although I've been out here 7 months, it doesn't feel like that long because we've been shut down due to the COVID crisis.
Sure.
And so that's kind of restricted some of the things we can do and places I can go. And I still have a number of opportunities to preach, and that's been good.
Absolutely.
But it's not like it's normal. And camps and all those things are messed up with churches.
Oh, yeah. We go to Falls Creek from here for youth camp, and man, we were missing that this year.
Yep. And we own our own camp, and we were able to pull off a youth camp, but unfortunately, a couple of the sponsors who came down were exposed to COVID before they came, and
Uh-oh.
found out they were positive after they were there. And
Oh,
we had a couple of secondary infections. Thankfully, none of them were serious. No one was
good.
terribly sick, but sure gave us a good scare. It's just the world
Absolutely.
that we live in.
Yeah, crazy town.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to do your doctorate in church revitalization, it has to be a passion of yours.
It truly is.
Absolutely.
It's something that I love and I'm invested in.
Yes.
God's given me a little experience with this, a little passion, and my desire is really to share what I have learned with others and to help them walk through it. And if I could save them some of the pain that I had to go through, praise the Lord.
All right. There's a lot probably listeners today that don't even know what this is. What is church revitalization? What is it?
Good. The ultimate goal for every church is for it to experience revival. And that's the amazing refreshing that comes from the presence of the Lord. And when the Spirit comes and dwells and fills and brings his people back to repentance and obedience to the Word of God. Revitalization is kind of the work that we do. I remember sitting in a doctoral seminar, actually, and I heard the story of G. Campbell Morgan. And he was philosopher, professor, pastor, teacher. He was training some preacher boys, and he used the illustration. He said, "Boys, you put your boat out on a lake and you put up a sail, and you wait for the wind, and the wind is blowing. That's a fact. You don't sit down in the boat and say, 'I decline to make any use of this thing.'" He said, "You put up the sail." And when I heard that, it's like, oh my word, that's the work of revitalization. It's
Mm,
getting the church to put up the sail to catch the wind.
mm.
Nothing we do can really revitalize a church. We don't have
No.
that resurrection power.
Right. Right.
But God can resurrect the dead. He can bring it back to life. Look at Ezekiel chapter 37, the valley of
Yes.
dry bones. When the wind came across that valley from those four corners of the earth, up
Yes.
stood a mighty and vast army. And so we're praying for a great revival in our land. Until then, I'm just encouraging churches and pastors uh, to learn how to put up the sail, to get ready when God begins to work and move, that your church is ready to experience that. And so revitalization in the narrow sense is the work that we do to prepare for the work only God can do.
Right. So those of us in the trenches, as you might put it, our jobs are to are manyfold. But one of the things that we continue to try to do is to prepare our people for when God would move, that we'd be ready to move with Him in that process.
Absolutely. And that process also involves dreaming a new dream
Right.
and leading your church to see what can happen when people are totally surrendered to the will of God. And when people get a vision for what God wants to do through their church, it changes everything. They begin to dream and they begin to plan and
Mhm.
they begin to put some things in place. And I'm thinking that in our current time, maybe it's a really good time because what used to be really isn't anymore. We've discovered that so much about our church's program and planning was fluff. It was designed to entertain maybe our
Easy,
church.
easy now.
Yeah. Many times we're on automatic pilot too. We don't have to do anything more. We're used to doing this.
I'm so
We've
glad
got
you
this
say that,
down.
and I don't have to now. Thank you.
And yeah, I'm sorry. I hope I don't get you into trouble, but it's the truth. And it's the truth everywhere.
Yeah,
I've had calls from England and Mexico and Panama and, so it's not just Canada, it's not just Oklahoma.
right.
You know, um, every church everywhere is
Mhm.
experiencing this same thing.
Well, if
And
it's 90 to 93%, oh my goodness, it's most of the churches in every town.
it is, it is.
Now, was that I know that came out of Lifeway Research and Ed Stetzer. Was that Baptist or was that evangelical?
I think it's the evangelical church.
Wow.
The
Okay.
problem is we only have statistics really from us and other reporting denominations. Many non-denominational groups don't
Sure.
report their statistics to any
Yeah.
ecumenical group, so we have no way to track them. And so sometimes we just hear what is, and sometimes that gets baptized through the filter of we want you to hear the
Really?
good
You
news. And
mean pastors inflate their numbers? What?
well, They
What?
filter out the good stuff and give you the things that they think you ought to, how was church Sunday, preacher? Oh, it was great. We had two people join. They got to baptize one, but they didn't tell you, the nursery worker quit and two old ladies about got in a fight in front of the water fountain. they, they tell you the good news, don't so much tell you the bad news. So,
Well, that's how a lot of things are, That's
yeah,
how it is.
it is.
Well, we're kind of touching on this idea of revitalization. Why? I mean, obviously 93% plateau, declining, dead.
Dying,
Um,
right?
this is why we need it to assist and to help our churches.
Yeah. And I remember as I first got started in this ministry, a really dear friend who later became part of my team here at Church Revitalizer. We were at lunch together, and he said, why should I listen to you? Why does anyone listen to you about church revitalization? I mean, give me the reason why we should have this conversation. And I just thought, man, that is really good. He just pinned me up against a wall because I'm not all that. I don't have all the answers, but the answer that I gave him, I think it was truly a blessing that God gave that word to me, because I said, William, the truth is I'm not an expert in anything, and I'm not great at anything.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but I'm like the guy who walks by the swimming pool and a kid is drowning. Somebody's got to jump in the pool and save that kid.
Oh yeah.
Is there a more qualified lifeguard out there? Are there people who are better swimmers? Yes and yes. But, here's the problem. Somebody's got to jump in the pool. Another analogy is, somebody's got to tell everybody there's a hole in the boat. And for the last 13 years, I've been that guy banging the bell, not, saying, hey, there's a hole in the boat. We got to fix this problem. And now there's a lot of people out there telling you, what the problem is. It's not difficult to discover what our problems are.
Right.
And if
Right.
you wanted that short list of what causes churches to plateau, decline, or die, I can give those to you. But the reality is there needs to be people out here who are saying, listen, church, there
Mhm.
is hope. It is possible to turn around. It is amazing when you experience that refreshing power of God's Spirit, and it can happen to you. It will happen to you. God wants to revive his bride. There's a reason chapter 2 and chapter 3 are in the book of Revelation.
Mhm.
God's put that in there to make sure everyone hears the letter that Jesus
Mhm.
wrote to those churches that were struggling. He wants them to be revitalized.
Absolutely.
I almost
So
preached, didn't I?
yeah, well, you'll get there. What is it? What's it look like? I mean, boots on the ground,
Okay.
a church. What a church that needs it. What's that look like? And then a church that's going through it. What does that look like? I mean, what's involved?
Well, that's a really great question. And the truth is, you can't help anyone that doesn't want to be helped.
Kind of like an addict.
Yeah. A lot of people, yeah, exactly. They will stick their toe in the water. Tell me about this. And I've had people say, can you just kind of summarize this, and it just, what three things do I need to work on?
Yeah,
It's not that easy.
not a self-help book.
It's more like going to the doctor and getting assessed what is the problem. And the diagnosis is the hardest part. It's true for mechanics as well who work on your car. In fact, my second book, which hopefully will be coming out soon, the working title is Spiritual Mechanics, because that's what we are. We
Right.
got to figure out what's wrong and fix it. And every church has got a different problem. And sometimes it's entrenched leadership, and sometimes it's an aging and dying congregation. Sometimes it's a transitional community. Sometimes, I mean, it can be a plethora of reasons, and you got to figure out what it is in your church setting, diagnose it, and then begin to address it. Sometimes it's sin in the camp. I went into one church and got nowhere. They wanted to partner with my church, and I led my church to do that. And we worked for about 6 months and got no progress whatsoever, zero progress. And I was sharing my frustration with a pastor friend, and he said, I used to be on staff of that church, don't you? I said, no. He said, you don't even know what the problem is, do you? I said, I guess not. He said, the problem, he said, take me to lunch. I'll tell you the problem. I said, okay. So I made an appointment with him, took him to lunch, and he said, here's the problem. The chairman of deacons and the church clerk are sleeping together and living together right across the street from the church. I said, oh my gosh, are you kidding? He said, yeah, they've been doing that for 10 or 12 years now.
Yeah, I
With
had
two key
I had a
leaders of the
similar
church.
situation early on in
Yeah.
ministry that, wow, I know. I've been there.
Another church I worked with, they had a church leader who was running a brothel out of a part of the church that was no longer used. They
Oh,
thought it was just
tell
sealed
me it
off
ain't
for
so,
storage.
man.
And it's true. I mean, there's some really twisted churches out there. And until you address problems, until you say there's sin in our camp,
Yeah.
like the story of Achan, until that's rooted out, and it's uncomfortable to go back. But every church that's in decline got off the interstate at the wrong exit somewhere. They made a choice, and it's almost always this one. The day that they decided they were going to live by sight and not by faith. There was a faith decision that
Mhm.
they got wrong. Sometimes it has to do with dismissing a staff member that they had no biblical grounds to dismiss. I've worked with a number of churches that have had that phenomenon going on. And you know what? When you dismiss a staff member without biblical cause, you're working against the Lord, and it's going to
Yeah.
be bad for you as a church. So, those are the things. As far as what does the church do, or how do you respond to it? Maybe is a better way to phrase it. It goes everywhere from it's time to take this person off life support and let them die. This church, there's nothing you can do, and hopefully they're wise enough to allow the building and properties and things to be repurposed, given to another congregation, or used for another 501c3 type ministry.
Right.
And sometimes it's as minor as coaching the pastor through something he doesn't really lead well in. And so that's one extreme to the other. In between is everything from another church coming in, adopting you or fostering
Wow.
you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's two churches merging, or maybe two churches swapping properties, a church that's growing, needing more space, and a church that's
Hmm.
big with lots of space and not many members can just literally
Right.
swap properties.
Intriguing.
Yeah, Tom Chaney wrote a book and he identified about 38 different models
Oh
for
my word.
revitalizing. And if you want to buy that book, I'm sure Tom would appreciate my endorsement of that.
I'm
So,
sure he would.
yeah,
So, I mean, even to the point of, I mean, one of the things I've heard, shutting a church down for like 6 months to 9 months and letting them retool themselves and then basically rebranding themselves as they are open.
yeah, there's two versions of that. One is replanting and the other is restarting.
Okay.
Technically, they're different. Replanting basically says, we're going to kill you off, take your building, your budget, your bylaws, and ask you to leave. And we'll put a church planter in there with a new core group. And this will be a completely different church. It will not have the
Yeah.
same testimony or witness or ministry the former group had in this building. We'll change the name, rebrand.
Yep.
The restart says, okay, we need to shut down for a little bit and rethink this. Many times, everybody is fired from their positions, and they're caused to reevaluate. Does this person need to be a Sunday school teacher? Does this person
Oh, I
need
see
to
what you,
be?
okay. Yeah.
And so they restart it with a brand new purpose and with new leadership in place. It's an opportunity to get rid of those entrenched leaders. And so
Staff stay or go usually in those moments.
generally, when they're at that point, there's no staff to speak of anyway.
Oh, okay. It's gotten to
Generally,
that
it's
point.
just a pastor, bivocational at
Right.
best. Um, that's another problem that we have is a pastor shortage. Our pastors are getting older, and
Yeah.
they're staying in ministry longer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they stay in ministry long enough to get to retirement, to the demise of the church, kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean, where the boat's sinking and he steps off on the dock and walks away. Sadly, that's how a lot of senior pastors
Yeah.
kind of approach their retirement. Hey, it
Yeah.
got me to retirement, and who
I call
cares?
it the Hezekiah syndrome. As long as it's not in my lifetime.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
God gives you 10 more years. So
Yeah. How does a church see the need? I mean, is it usually somebody like you that it's like addressing it with them and making them see it? I mean, do churches voluntarily see this? I mean, how does that process even begin?
Well, again, it's very different for every church.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's only in a moment of crisis that a church comes to this realization. Sometimes it's only after they've been through, the wars and everybody leaving, and it's just a
Mhm.
blessed few that are still there. But occasionally there's a wise pastor who says, I've been looking at the numbers and it's not good, and the trend is not good.
Mhm.
And if we do not intercept this entropy, this natural decay, we're going to be in trouble in X number of years.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that, because now, there's not been so much damage that it can't be repaired easily. And
Exactly.
it is an involved process. It's going to take some time. But when the pain of staying the same
Mhm.
is worse, you'll change. When
That's
you're
right.
sick of who you are, when you
Yes.
just can't do it anymore, and you throw your hands up and say,
Mhm.
God, whatever you want to do, we'll give up control, and we'll just do what you want us to do. And if you think about this, one of the temptations uh, that Jesus was given was the temptation to control everything in his environment. Turn that stone into bread. That would solve all your problems. Church control is the predominant issue in this millennium that I've
Yeah.
seen. I mean, who's in charge? And we'll make the decision. You won't. Boy, when Jesus is not the one making the decisions and controlling the life and health of the church
Mhm.
is going to be in trouble really quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what success rate do you see in churches? I mean, are you seeing you got 100 churches that need revitalizing? How many of them are actually going to get it done?
Well, those pastors who want to understand this, who come and dip their toe in the water and are not really committed to it, their success rate is virtually nothing. It's
Mhm.
zero. Those that are committed to this process, many times it requires a covenant relationship between another party, either the convention or the local association, or
Right.
maybe a sister church. When the church gets to the point and that they're willing to say, we vote that we're going to do this and we're going to stay on this task, and nothing else will enter into this equation
Right.
until we accomplish this. When that covenant relationship is made, churches have an incredibly high success rate. It's the tepid water, the casual approach. Well, let's look and see. Those churches don't do it very well at all.
Yeah.
So if a church is going to do this, they need to be in a covenant with somebody. And another reason, maybe that pastor gets called away, or maybe he dies, or some unfortunate thing happens.
Right.
There'll be some people say, "Hey, let's go a different way," but you'll have that one person who has that institutional memory who says, "No, you remember, we made a promise before God that
That's
we
right.
would continue this until this process was complete." And depending on where you are and how far down you are, I mean, it can take it can take 3 to 5 years if it,
Yeah.
worst case scenario. But here's the good news: the tasks that you engage in right away in revitalization, you see some fruit right away. You see some immediate changes and some immediate progress. It takes 3 to 5 years for it to become the new DNA, where
Yeah.
it's the new way that you think and you don't even think the old way anymore. And so don't let me scare you when I say it's a long process,
Right.
because it becomes a very good process right away and something that people enjoy, but it is work and it does get tiresome. I will confess that. And there
Sure.
is that temptation to move on, do something else, like frogs on a lily pad, thinking there's more flies over there.
Are
Hop,
we
hop,
not
hop.
done yet?
Yeah, aren't we done yet? Can't you just move on? How long are you going to preach through Matthew, preacher? I mean, it's that same
Yeah.
kind of attitude, and it's the church that stays the course. So this is what we're doing. This is right. This is what God has for our church. Those are the ones that have incredible success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pivoting just a little bit. Um, how has, in your opinion, how has COVID changed the game for church moving through the rest of this year into the next?
I just got back from Southwestern Seminary this last weekend. We were at a think tank and we spent an entire day. We spent a whole day Friday talking about this topic. And we came up with quite a lengthy list
Oh, let me get my pen.
of changes. I can email that to you. You don't want to do that on air for sure, but the list is pretty impressive. But the things that kind of came out of that is the hybrid church looks like it's here to stay. And the hybrid church,
what do you mean by that?
It's the church that is going to be both online and in person.
Okay.
We don't really see that going away in the immediate future.
Right.
Some have shifted away from in person altogether. Some very prominent names in our circles, like Andy Stanley and J.D. Greer, have already led their churches to dismiss all in person gatherings through the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so that is a very popular trend. There's some churches who are very resistant to doing anything with technology or anything online. It feels impersonal or whatever. But that model looks like it's here to stay. It's a tool that allows actually churches to reach more people. The problem is, people can sit at home and they can watch 3 or 4 services on a Sunday morning.
Right.
It becomes a new pattern. And
yes.
one of the statistics that George Barnett just released is that only 32% of the people who were at the church in March will be at the church today, because many of them have moved on. Now, I want to say this. I think he's talking about the larger churches. The smaller churches are not seeing that same shift or migration, especially if it's the only Baptist church in that town. There's nowhere else to go. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But the online forum has allowed them to tune into other services, even other denominational services.
It might be the same survey, but I read it as well on a podcast that I listened to, not read it, but 48% it said haven't attended any service in the last month.
Yeah.
Which, we talk about Zoom fatigue. I think the online fatigue is hitting some as well. They want to be in person, but at the same time, that's difficult for some in some areas of our country to even be in person. So it's really, it's a struggle to, some churches are finding it hard to get online. Some people are finding it hard to get online. And somewhere in the middle is this hybridization that we're going to have to move to. And everybody's going to have to make some shifts in order to be successful at this.
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many people I trained on how to do a Zoom call, just so that they could have services. It's not the most difficult technology to learn, but it is new for so many people. Another trend that's coming out of the COVID experience is that many of our senior adult pastors are not going to continue on because this work is different. It's hard. It requires extra steps.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's easier because there's more time at home. There's more downtime.
Sure.
You're not interfacing with people face to face. But on the other side of that coin, it's much harder because you have to be more deliberate. You have to think about, when can I get this done, and how does that get recorded, or did everyone get invited to this? And so, and then
did I miss anybody and now they're mad?
Yeah. And Zoom calls wear you out. After you've had a number of those in a single day.
Isn't that weird?
And I don't understand.
I can have 5 meetings a day and be tired. I can do 5 Zoom meetings a day and be exhausted. I don't understand. I don't understand what the difference is. It's the same number of meetings. I don't get it.
Exactly.
But it's true.
Zoom fatigue. Maybe you ought to trademark that little name right there.
Oh, it's not original to me.
No. I think everyone.
3P wasn't original Pat Riley either, and he stole it and copyrighted it. So there's that. So
there you go. So the church is going to be different. Another trend is that churches are getting rid of the fluff. They're going to be more concentrated on what they're going to do going forward. Huh?
Lean and mean.
Lean and mean. The trend is going to be away from having so many staff members, support and ministry staff. Looks like churches are pulling back. Those that have full-time positions, when that vacancy comes open, doesn't look like it's going back to another full-time position. I think churches are just realizing that so much of what we do is superfluous. it is really not necessary. And
Yeah.
maybe that's good. Maybe it helps us to concentrate on things that really are important.
One of the things that I've asked around here at times is, we haven't had it in 19 weeks. Do we really miss it? Or we haven't had ... in 19 weeks. I haven't received one question about it. Therefore,
Yeah,
is it really
it's not a
necessary?
big deal. And the two groups that are missing in-person gatherings, the first one won't be a surprise, is senior adults,
Sure.
because it's their social context.
Yes,
The other group that misses the in-person are millennials.
absolutely.
And that's why we see them gathered up at the beach, because they want to be together.
Right.
That's the way they were trained. That's, even though they're the video game culture and the computer culture kids, they still have an intense need to be social.
Right.
And I even quizzed my own son, who's a classic millennial, and I said, "So tell me about worshiping online." And he said, "I do it every Sunday." He said, "But I'm sick of it." He said, "I cannot wait to be back in church in person."
Right.
So I know it to be true, even in my own family.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to my youth minister, and he's struggling because he's a high touch person, and likes to be in and around kids, as every youth minister I know is. And 20 weeks ago you were having 60 in youth group. Well, now you've got 5 that'll join a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what do I do with this? And that's, everybody is
Well,
just,
you have to be more pastoral.
I know.
You have to go to them.
Oh
That's
yeah.
the way we were
Oh
all
yeah.
trained in
Yep.
college and seminary, and we kind of got away from it because we were used to them coming to us. Now we got to go to them. You can hunt
Right.
as a frog,
As
or you
much
can
as you
hunt as
can
a
go
lizard.
to them in this moment of
Frog
crisis.
waits for people to come to him. A lizard goes out and gets them. And so you got to turn all your staff into lizards. You got to go get them.
Oh yeah. And he's working hard at that. And I sure applaud what he's doing. I just know that the Zoom thing it's a struggle for everybody.
And another crazy thing, one of the groups that has taken to Zoom like no other are the children. I have
Really?
I have a friend that's a children's minister, and he sets up a children's worship every Sunday and encourages the kids to watch it in the living room with their parents. And they
Hmm.
have games and songs, and he's got like 350 kids who
Wow.
join his children's worship every single Sunday, far more than he had ever had in person.
That's crazy.
So there's some amazing possibilities with technology as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, appreciate you taking some time with me today and just sharing some of these things. I really would like for you to send me maybe the notes that you had from that conference. I would be intrigued to see what that is. But anyway, Terry, thank you for being on with me today and just sharing your heart. And sometimes the things that you're having to be involved with and that God laid as a passion on your heart are the hard things. And revitalizing is a hard thing because churches have to get to a certain point before they're ready, and that's really hard. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for
Appreciate
what
that,
you do.
Aaron. It was a blessing to be with you today.
Well, thank you for being with us on the Daily Dose for this day. Have a great day, and don't forget, check out fbccrowley.org for all things that are updating and opportunities that are provided to you. You guys have a great day.